What's going on, guys? It's Tom, or Top 10 Wrestling, and welcome back to another video. We're still going with this upload schedule of every other day. It's very hard work, but I'm keeping up with it. And today, we're going to be looking at the rise and fall of Dixie Carter in TNA Wrestling. Dixie Carter is a very polarizing figure. We're going to talk about how she came to be in TNA and what she's been up to since leaving TNA, all that and more. But before we get into it, I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters, Marky D, Efran Martin, Alan Barkley, and Gravedigger33 for exclusive content and more stuff from me. Check out my Patreon down below, linked in the description. It would really help me out during these trying times, and as a whole, would be very much appreciated. But let's stop wasting time and let's get right into the video. So who is Dixie Carter? Well, Dixie Carter is an American businesswoman who was born on October 6, 1964 to parents Robert and Janice Carter. When she was 20, her parents Robert and Janice founded Panda Energy, a Texas-based company which operates and maintains environmentally friendly power plants. This company grew to become very successful. In 2002, Dixie Carter was contacted by a booking agency who informed her of the newly formed TNA Wrestling and told her that they were in need of a marketing and publicity outlet, and so Dixie Carter began working with TNA in order to provide that for them. However, after just a couple of months of working with TNA, Jeff Jarrett informs Dixie that one of TNA's key financial backers had withdrawn and that TNA was probably going to be out of business soon. This is when Dixie took it upon herself to contact her parents and ask them to invest in TNA, as Dixie really believed in the company. And so Panda Energy would buy a 71% stake of TNA, and Dixie Carter had essentially saved TNA from going out of business. Less than a year later, Dixie Carter would officially become TNA president. Dixie Carter for the next 3 years sort of just let TNA do their own thing. Many people consider 2004 to 2007 as TNA's best years, so clearly Dixie must have been doing something right as president during these times. And throughout the years, Dixie Carter would often be spotted at front row of pay-per-views, including Turning Point 2007, where she shouted at Samoa Joe, who was cutting a shoot promo burying Scott Hall, to which Samoa Joe replied to Dixie saying, "What are you gonna do? Fire me?" Godspeed, Samoa Joe. Godspeed. What a badass. However, Dixie Carter did do some questionable things during this time, including the hiring of Vince Russo. Vince Russo is someone I'm very indifferent on. There's lots from his booking style that I like, but also lots that I dislike. But it's pretty well known that Russo is fairly disliked in the wrestling scene by fans, particularly TNA fans. So much so that while Russo was in TNA, fans would often chant "Fire Russo" whenever something stupid was happening. Dixie Carter's stance on the "Fire Russo" chants was very weird, because despite the fact that TNA fans are clearly showing their disgust in Russo, there were rumors going around during this time that Dixie Carter had decided that for every "Fire Russo" chant, she was gonna fire someone else in the creative team, which makes absolutely no sense, but from what I know, nobody was ever fired, so thank God for that. Dixie Carter made her first official on-screen appearance for TNA on the August 27th, 2009 episode of Impact, interviewing new signing Bobby Lashley. This would be a sign of things to come, and the next questionable Dixie Carter decision would take place. Later that year, in October 2009, it was announced that Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff would be joining TNA. I've said this before many times, but Hogan and Bischoff coming back to TNA, or coming to TNA, was an absolute recipe for disaster. It was never going to work, and, well, it didn't. In early 2010, Hogan and Bischoff would become on-screen characters for TNA, as would Dixie Carter, who would begin appearing on TNA regularly as an authority figure. This was a bad idea, especially long term. A storyline took place in the year where she would lose control of the company to Hogan and Bischoff, making her look really stupid. Because of this, she would be absent from TV for a long time, before making her return a year and a half later at Bound for Glory 2011, when Sting defeated Hulk Hogan to regain Dixie Carter's power, and she was back on TV once again, and more stupidity would take place. It was less than a year later that the awful Claire Lynch storyline would take place. This was essentially a storyline that saw Christopher Daniels and Kazarian accuse Dixie Carter of having an affair with AJ Styles. It was eventually revealed that AJ and Dixie were actually helping their friend Claire Lynch battle her addiction issues. But then it was revealed that AJ had impregnated Claire and AJ was having the affair. It was one of the worst storylines in TNA history, and a storyline that I genuinely never want to make a standalone video on, because I seriously don't want to watch all the TNA TV surrounding it. Like, I just don't want to subject myself to it. Then we move on to 2013 and 2014, which are easily going to go down as the worst years for Dixie Carter, both as an on-screen character and in her behind-the-scenes decision-making. It all started off in late 2013 when Dixie Carter would turn heel and would essentially just become the Stephanie McMahon of TNA. This was a really bad move. We had the authority in WWE at this time. No one wanted to see a heel authority figure that outshadows everyone else. No one wanted to see that in TNA. Shortly after this, later in the year, in December, Dixie Carter would fail to come to an agreement with AJ Styles over a new contract, and TNA had just lost their biggest star in history. But Dixie Carter looked to fill that void of the biggest star. Supposedly backstage, Dixie Carter was always a really big fan of Magnus. So when Magnus won the world title in 2013 and then defeated AJ to unify the title, you have to believe that Dixie Carter had a lot to do with that. In January 2014, MVP would debut in TNA, and he would begin feuding with Dixie Carter to take control over the company. At Lockdown, the match was made between Team Dixie, Bobby Roode, Austin Aries, and the Bromans versus Team MVP, made up of himself, the Wolves, and Willow. The match was won by Team MVP, and despite the fact that Dixie Carter was out of power, she would still continue appearing on TV. Bully Ray began feuding with Dixie Carter after Lockdown, claiming that he is going to put her through a table, and after months of build, on the August 7th, 2014 Impact episode, Bully Ray put Dixie through a table in an amazing and satisfying moment. The way I describe Dixie Carter as a heel authority figure doesn't really reflect just how long and painful this time in TNA was and felt. It was horrible, and Bully Ray putting her through a table was genuinely what we needed. And who can forget, it was also around this time that we found out that Vince Russo had secretly been rehired by TNA, and it was kept confidential. This made Spike TV so angry that they dropped TNA from their network. This was one of the biggest L's TNA ever took. And the day Spike dropped them, many argue, is the day that TNA died. After being put through the table by Bully Ray, Dixie Carter would only make a couple of appearances per year, which was for the better. In 2016, Dixie Carter would officially be removed from her role as president, as she became the new chairwoman in place for Billy Corgan, who was now the new president. Soon after though, Billy Corgan announced that he would be suing TNA and Dixie Carter, and it was around this time that people really thought that this was the end of TNA. Obviously, there had been many times that people thought TNA was gonna die, but this was really the definitive moment. People really thought it was gonna die, including me. They owed money to the state of Tennessee, they owed money to Billy Corgan, viewership and interest was down, and rumours were afloat that WWE was preparing a bid. However, TNA was saved by Anthem, who bought 85% of the company, settled the lawsuit with Billy Corgan, and left Dixie Carter with just 5% ownership, essentially meaning she had no power anymore in terms of decision making for the company. She would be removed as chairwoman for a lesser role and has not appeared on Impact TV since. And that's basically the rise and fall of Dixie Carter in TNA Wrestling. Since this, the only mainstream press Dixie Carter has really received is when she appeared on British TV and it was revealed that she was the genetic cousin of British presenter Declan Donnelly, which as a Brit, I can say is pretty crazy. So overall, Dixie Carter's time in TNA, obviously people are going to look back at it in despair. That phase in 2013-2014 was awful. The Claire Lynch stuff was awful. The stuff with Hogan and Bischoff was awful. Hiring Vince Russo, awful, awful, awful. But the fact is, I need to give credit to Dixie where it's due. She saved the company. She saved the company from going out of business, all because she believed in it. And that's another thing. Despite the fact that Dixie Carter went through all these horrible storylines, you could really tell that she did believe in the company. And to that, I will always give her credit for. I always will. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. If you did enjoy, then be sure to smack that like button. Follow me on Twitter at TNA Wrestling. Subscribe with notifications on so you never miss a video. We're trying to hit 200k. Help me get there. Check out my Patreon down below, patreon.com/TNA Wrestling. Exclusive content and the lot you can find there. Instagram is at I'm Tom Bell. I'll see you guys with a new video in 2 days time, because this upload schedule is something I'm trying to do going forward and it's absolutely killing me, but I'm enjoying it and it seems like you guys are too. So cheers for the support. I'll see you all soon. Goodbye and keep on rolling.